Point of Impact podcast with Rick McDaniel. Thanks for joining us today. Get ready to be inspired and motivated to live a high-impact life. Now, here's Rick.
Welcome to another episode of the Point of Impact podcast. I'm Rick McDaniel. Thanks for joining us again today. And we're going to start something new. We were doing a number of episodes on decisions, and I said last week that I wanted to do something which, when I looked back, I was kind of surprised I've never really talked about much before, which is relationships. It's a huge issue, and it's something that I've spoken about a lot over the years, but have never dedicated any podcast episodes to talking about it. And that's certainly something that needs to be addressed, needs to be looked at. And I'm excited about spending a number of episodes in trying to help you with your relationships. I've got, I think, a lot of great topics. Like today, we'll talk about myths about healthy relationships and relationship destroyers. We'll talk about relational viruses, which will be fascinating. What about hard to love people? So we've got some good ones that we're going to cover over the next series of weeks and series of episodes. And I'm looking forward to sharing these with you because relationships are the fabric of life, are the core of life. And if our relationships are good, basically our lives are going to be good, even if other things are challenging. And if they're bad, even if other things are going great, it's really hard to be happy. So it's super important, and got a lot of experience in this through my career of counseling folks and studying it, researching it, writing about it, speaking about it. I think I can help you in a lot of ways, and I'm really looking forward to jumping into this. And even today, I really think that some of these myths, boy, they're not true. But, if you're not careful, they can really undermine your relationships. And, you may have bought into some of these for a variety of reasons that we'll look at. Before we jump in, I do want to say I've been doing a lot of interviews lately about staying positive in the midst of all this negativity. We have this pandemic that's coming to an end, but it's still, the vestiges are still around, and there's still challenges from it for sure. And then we have this war going on in Ukraine that is very disturbing and has all sorts of potential things that could take place. We have inflation and prices that are high, and gas prices, and there's a lot of things that are very, very challenging right now. And so I've been talking on radio and other podcasts, about these things, and specifically about what we can do. And one of the main things I'm talking about is really framing your thinking before you start your day, like making sure that you begin your day in the right mindset. And one way to do that is by reading the book that I've written, or specifically a reading, because there's 100 of them. You can call them readings, devotions, meditations, whatever you want to call them. 2 pages, take you about 2.5 or 3 minutes, and you read one each day, ideally in the morning before you even start your day. So I just want to encourage you, talking on other people's podcasts and radio interviews and other things, talking about this. I want to make sure in my own podcast that I'm just encouraging you to do that, to start your day with the right mindset. Get the book, This is Living, Daily Inspiration to Live Your Faith. You can just get it on Amazon. And then just each day before you enter into the day, and let your mind start to receive the news of the day and all kinds of other things. Just start your day in the right way with the right mindset. I think it'll do wonders for you. So I encourage you to do that. All right, let's jump in. 10 myths about healthy relationships. I mean, they're just our myths that we have, that we pick up. And how does this happen? Well, just who taught you about relationships? I mean, maybe you're getting your information from movies and television, or maybe your parents, or maybe you're a child of divorce, and it's sort of like the power of the negative example. Look, don't do that, I'll do something different. could be talking with your friends. I don't know what it is, but these sources certainly don't guarantee a healthy relationship. And what it leads to in many ways is some type of miscommunication about the nature of what it means to have a healthy relationship. And I just love, I've done these a number of times through the years, these myths. I guess I just like them. I've written the myths, the 5 myths about this or that, spoken about them. And so it just sort of fits in my mentality. When these things are myths, they're not true. They're inaccurate. And you need to understand that so that you can have the kind of health. So let's just begin with the first myth. And it's a great place to start, the love myth. It's easy to fall in love because intense physical attraction and passion will do that. When I met my wife, there was just I'd call it almost infatuation, just an intense attraction. But making that deep passion the kind of foundation of your relationship is problematic because infatuation fades. I mean, it just doesn't, it's just not built for the long haul. That's not love. For a strong, healthy relationship, you have to focus more on a love that is deeper, that has to do with companionship, shared interests, shared values, enjoying time together. I mean, these things are what really root you in a deeper love relationship. And by the way, I just want to say now, I've been married for a number of years, over 30 years. So I do think I'm speaking from, I mentioned all the knowledge in terms of experience, counseling, all those things, but just want to make sure that you understand that I also have the, sort of the boots on the ground to use a military term, since we're in this season, unfortunately, in the foxhole. Like, I've been there, I've done that, I've experienced it, I've raised a family, I've done all these sorts of things. So they're real. They're absolutely positively real to me. This isn't just talk. And the companionship part is really huge. The shared values and shared interest and spending time together, all these sorts of things are crucial. And I don't have time to get into that more right now, but we will in these episodes on relationships. I'll come back to this because there's more to say. The second, and this is a huge one, the soulmate myth. Nearly 2/3 of Americans believe in soulmates, or the idea that there's one single person who's your perfect match. And it's a very charming idea, makes for a great movie or fairy tale, but it's a dangerous thing if you're single to constantly be on the quest for the, perfection, that perfect soulmate, because that's just really a poor way, a faulty way to go about seeking a long-term relationship in marriage. That's just not the best approach. In relationships, this sort of belief in soulmates can keep you from being willing to accept flaws, to be able to look at someone who may be your future spouse or is your spouse and look at them and be able to see them as imperfect human beings who are learning and growing, just like you are an imperfect human being that is learning and growing. It's just a danger there to think in these terms. And one of the things that always, if you still think, oh, there's only one person, and you're like, hey, Rick, you found that person, look how long you've been married. But I just can tell you that I know people that have lost their spouse to death and found someone else, after a period of time, and then that new person, in my experience in interacting with them, with both spouses, the one they had, the one that passed away, and then the new spouse, very similar, not in their home, but to me, it's just an example of, maybe there just isn't that one soulmate kind of idea that we can have. There's people out there that you could match up with, and really it's finding the right person, going back to the earlier love that, you can really share life with, and also can just really be accepting of what you want to do with your life, like your goals and, how you want to pursue life. Because I've had some friends that this has really been a real sticking point, where as time goes on and life takes someone in a particular direction, especially public life I'm thinking of, and then the spouse just doesn't really necessarily want that public life. And not good, and it's good to make sure that you understand that, someone's like, well, I thought we would just always live here near my family, as opposed to pursuing, say, job opportunities or promotions that might take you other places. All these sorts of things are things that just hugely important. And you got to line up with somebody who's got that together, rather than this kind of like rom-com version of the perfect person, your soulmate. Here's another myth. This is an interesting one from recent research, the commitment myth. And this is really some pandemic related, or produced, you might say, change. Prior to COVID, 58% of singles wanted to settle down. Today, 76% want a committed relationship. Holy smokes. An 18% increase? That is gigantic. Gigantic. And here's another thing. Men are actually leading the way in a Match.com study of over 55,000 single Americans. It says that men are falling in love faster and more often, which is fascinating to me as a guy, and that they are interested in moving in together faster. And by the way, we'll get to that cohabitation myth in a moment. So and here's the thing, they're more likely to want a committed relationship within the next year. So the old thinking was men fear commitment. And by the way, there's definite evidence for that. Absolutely. But the pandemic may have changed some of that, and, spending time alone and just really kind of looking at what life is really all about has led some men, as certainly a significant increase, to say, I'm ready for this. And just the overall idea of singles wanting to be in a relationship and have such an enormous increase like that. I mean, I just think that that's worth hearing again. From 58 to 76% want a committed relationship. Wow. That's from over half to 3/4. That's a little over half to 3/4. I mean, that's a significant increase. So that's something to look at if you're single. And again, if you're a guy and guys are saying, yeah, I'm ready for this. I'm ready to make this move to enter into a stronger commitment. Good for you. That's a sign of maturity. And for women, I would say, hey, this is what's happening. The pandemic has changed things. So you may want to change your thinking and how you perceive things to be, or where you maybe think things were going, and they may end up moving faster. Here's another myth, the happiness myth. And basically it's just this idea that, that you're going to be happy in your relationship, and that's just the way it's going to be. But the truth is that no one is happy all the time. And again, I can speak to this. I've spoken about this before, the seasons of marriage, for instance. And believe me, there's the season before you have children. There's the season of young children. There's the season of teenagers. I mean, these are all distinct seasons in your marriage, and they're different. And you could nail one season. Really, you could nail it. And then in another season have some real challenges, and that would be perfectly normal and perfectly understandable. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't stay married. It just means that there are things that can happen that can cause the relationship to go through a tougher season. But if both people are willing to work through it, then things can get better and you can restore your level of happiness. Relationships ebb and flow. They're forever changing. So it's essential to just be flexible and kind of roll with those changes. And again, children, for instance, and then children, it's a massive difference. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have children. I think you should. The Bible says children are a gift from God. I think it's a fantastic thing, but it is a major change. And then the teenage years are a major change. In my marriage, it was really something because I was more the disciplinarian. My wife was more the nurturer. And then we got to the teenage years and my wife just really, didn't like some of the changes and some of the behaviors of the teenage children. And we sort of had like this switch where I became a little more like, hey, we've got to recognize these are not children now anymore. They're teenagers and they're growing toward independence. And that caused some challenges. So something you need to understand the seasons of a relationship. Here's another myth. I'll call it the ways myth. Meaning that, there's many ways to love and to be loved. The best description of this would be the book called The 5 Love Languages. And if you haven't read that book, I would just recommend that you get it. It's a very good book. Gary Chapman's the author. It's been around for a while, and it stays on the bestseller list, frankly, because new people are always introduced to the idea that there are 5 ways that we can give or experience love. And it's very possible that your love language may not be the same as your spouse or someone that you're dating. So people think that, we all feel the same way when we're in love. And this is a misconception. If you really loved me, then you would fill in the blank. But see, that's because you're speaking out of your love language. And so let's say your love language is verbal. Then you think that the other person should be saying things to you all the time, like, I love you, you're beautiful, you're handsome, giving you compliments, saying all these things. And that may not be their love language. And so you're not going to hear that. That doesn't mean, by the way, that, it's not my love language, so I can never say I love you. That's of course silly, but it's just not going to flow as naturally and as easily as it does for the person who has that love language. And so it's just really important to understand, like, the love language of presence, with a presence, with a C, that some people, they're just really there for you, and their presence is their way of saying how much they love you and care for you. And so they are there for you, but their words may not be coming out the way you'd like. It's just different. And so we just have to understand how we get there. There's attachment style has something to do with this. This is a psychological term, just how people were raised. And so what that does to them, how they attach to another person. But we're in this relationship, and we just need to understand that we have different love languages. And that's why it's so important to really read that book and kind of understand what yours is and what your spouse's is, or your boyfriend or girlfriend, so you can really understand each other better. It will go a long way. The cohabitation myth. Let's talk about this because it came up earlier. We're talking about men are more interested in moving faster toward living together. 65 to 70% of couples, depending on what survey you read, live together. And the idea is, you kick the tires, you take a test drive. I mean, that sounds right. It just all sounds right. Well, get ready to have this one blown up for you. 60% of marriages that survive 15 years were people who did not live together. 53% survived 15 years if the people lived together first. And that, by the way, that comes from the Centers of Disease Control of all places. This is not, just some sort of Christian survey or something to try to move a particular viewpoint that would be biblical. That's just from a government agency. So just think about it for a moment. The whole idea, you take a test drive, you kick the tires, you do all these things because we're gonna do a trial marriage. We're gonna do marriage light, We're going to, get on that ramp that leads to marriage. And what does it say? More marriages survive that don't do that than do. The reason cohabitating is popular is that you really don't have to deal with the marriage stuff. It's more fake than it is real. Marriage is an action. It's a decision. It's a statement. When you get married, you make a clear decision to commit to marriage and reject other options. So that's what marriage is about. So this cohabitation idea, it doesn't achieve what it supposedly is supposed to do. It does not do it. There's no empirical evidence or data that says this is the way to a good marriage. In fact, the data says the opposite. It says the opposite of that. It's pretend. It's not real. It's fake. It's not what marriage is really like. You ignore the hard things when you're living together because you can. And if you don't think you are, you are. I mean, this, decide, don't slide, this idea, you don't just slide into something, you make a decision to do it. And when you make a decision and when you make a commitment, then you have a much greater degree of potential success in a marriage. The problems myth. Couples sometimes, they're in a new relationship, they just ignore their differences. We'll figure it out later. They think their love will be enough to get them through anything. I mean, that's classic new love thinking. Unfortunately, love alone isn't enough to sustain a relationship. Yes, that's hard to hear. Love isn't enough. Now, if you give it the broadest definition of love, then you probably could say love is enough. But that would be a very large and broad definition. But in its more narrow definition, loving feelings, passion, these kinds of things, it takes more to sustain a relationship. You've got to be actively involved in figuring out your problems. How do we solve them? What are we going to do about them? Or you have to understand that there are issues that are not going to go away. They'll be with you for the duration of the relationship or the marriage. Differences are inevitable. And there is a lot to be said for agreeing to disagree. It's kept my marriage together, I can assure you. I mean, at the end of the day, my wife and I just say, I just agree to disagree. I do not agree with you. I do not see it like that. And I don't see any way that I ever will. But we'll just agree to disagree. It's important to have conversations where both of you feel like you're understood, your perspective is understood, you're accepted, and you can reach some type of compromise. And that's a big word, compromise. I've married my share of couples, and like 100 plus couples. So I've done a few of these, and I'm telling you, I always say to every couple when we're in the pre-marriage part, you've got to understand compromise. And when people wait to get married until they're older, which is what's happening today, that's even more years of single life and independent life. And then you have to realize, now I have to compromise. You've got to be able and be willing to compromise in a relationship that's going to end up in marriage and be healthy and long term. And let me just say this to those of you that are dating, you can't make it work with just anybody, and ignoring your differences is going to set you up for wasting time on a relationship that ultimately just is not a fit and it's not going to work. So you need to hear that as well. There's a place for compromise, and there's a place absolutely understanding differences. But if they're too different, don't get married and don't continue the relationship, because time is not going to be enough to change things. All right, the passion myth. In other words, something's got to be wrong, because if we're truly in love, the passion will never fade. The reality is that decline in passion is a natural part of the relationship. It tends to be high at the beginning, so everything's new and everything's exciting. But as time goes by and you get to know the person better, then the heat, the intensity will decrease. Now, I do want to say this. Again, I've been married for over 30 years, and I want you to know that what I would call the vibe, the electricity, it would still be evident in my marriage to this day. There is still heat, there is still passion. The only difference is that it is not as, say, consistent or as often, if you want to talk about it that way, like it is in the newness of a relationship, because in the newness of relationship, everything's about the relationship. But as time goes by, then you have to, you have a family, you have children, you have other responsibilities, your career increases. And so there are other things in life. And this is why I am a huge believer and proponent in having these romantic getaways, or as one of my sons calls them, romantic rendezvous, when he wants to be a smart aleck. Oh, you're going on a romantic rendezvous. Yes, we are, and you're not invited. So time when you can get away to just the two of you and leave everything, the job, the children, all the responsibilities behind, and reconnect and watch out, the passion will certainly return. Here's another myth, the mind reading myth. The belief that you should know what I want, in our romantic relationship. But that's not accurate. I mean, romantic partners are not mind readers, and you can have unrealistic expectations, and that just sets you up for failure. Now, listen, I've known my wife a long time, and I'm going to tell you what, I know a lot about the woman for sure, but she still surprises me with things that I did not see coming. So the more you know someone, the more you will know their mind. But the key is listening, being an active listener, expressing your own needs, expressing what you want, keeping the conversation positive. These things will make sure that you don't have to be a mind reader. What you need to be is a good listener. That's the key, is to listen. If you listen, you'll learn, and you'll know what it is that your spouse wants from you, and then you won't have to get into trying to be a mind reader. And here's the final myth, the competition myth. Most couples think that, communication is the key. A lot of people will say, counselors and people like me who talk about relationships, it's crucial. But there are those who would believe that competition is really the biggest issue, the keeping score, like it's your turn. It's your turn. You need to do your part here. This is this idea, that a relationship is 50-50 and we meet in the middle. This is another thing I always tell couples before I marry them. It's not a meet in the middle around the old oak tree, 50-50. It's 100-100. You got to be willing to go all the way 100%. If you try to keep score, then you end up on opposite teams, and this erodes the health of a relationship. Your partner can't take responsibility for everything. And maybe it's best to think it this way. There's just one plate. It's not like you take stuff off my plate. It's that, we have one shared plate. We're drawing on one another. If it's a drain, it's a drain on both of us. So that resources have to come from outside the couple, or you just decide to let things slide. Like we're just not going to keep banging on this. I'm just going to leave it alone. But this kind of competitive mentality is going to doom a marriage, doom a relationship. Does not lead to healthy relationships at all. So don't think in terms of competition and keeping score. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, I'm going to get taken advantage of. That's another discussion for another day. Hey, I've gone all the way, for you the last 5 times. And, this, now we're back to that word compromise. That's how you do it. The reality is relationships are challenging. People are, I always say, different gender, different background. Different personality. That's a lot of different. So they're challenging. but they're more challenging if you're relying on bad information like these 10 myths. So just work on the healthy relationship, and believe me, it has many, many, many marvelous benefits. And we'll continue talking about that in the weeks to come here on these episodes on this High Impact, Point of Impact podcast. So thanks for joining us today. Come back next week. We'll keep talking about relationships.
You've been listening to the Point of Impact podcast with Rick McDaniel. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to you joining us for our next episode.